19th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China has held its fourth plenary session in Beijing. These meetings provide opportunity for leaders of the Communist Party of China to assess the country's needs and focus on planning for them. High on the agenda this session were the topics of upholding and improving the system of socialism with Chinese characteristics and advancing the modernization of China's system and capacity for governance. So, how and why have the socialist system and the governance capability been highlighted? How will China go about improving these, and what are the challenges ahead? To discuss these issues and more, I'm joined in the studio by Mr. He Weiwen, Senior Fellow of the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University of China, and our current affairs commentator, Mr. Einar Tangen. We will also speak to Michele Geraci, former Undersecretary of State in Italy's Ministry of Economic Development via satellite from Rome. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Pandong. So, gentlemen, quite clear, two main focuses for this session. One's socialism with Chinese characteristics. The other is the modernization of the national governance system and the governing capability. Let's start with the first one. Quite a big term. Socialism with Chinese characteristics. How about we start with a specific angle? That is the leadership of the Communist Party of China. Mr. He, tell us why it's important and will be enhanced in the future.
I think because the goal is to realize China's rejuvenation of the Chinese nation by two steps, two centenary goals. So this is socialism with Chinese characteristics, because there are several socialist countries in the world, and China is the largest by far. And in China, we build socialism, we must have our own characteristics. No other countries can have enough experience for us to learn, so we must develop with our own characteristics. In order to do that, we must have a strong centralized leadership by the Chinese Communist Party. And in order to have a unified and strong leadership, we must have advanced modern system and the capacity of governance.
What's your take on this, Mr. Tangen?
Well, the difficulty is most people don't understand, socialism with the Chinese characteristics. I would just say it's pragmatic socialism. And if
so it's not a copy of any other socialist models, nor it's kind of a dogmatization of the very idea of socialism.
No, it isn't. I mean, China has fitted socialism to its things. For instance, there's a thriving market economy, free-market economy that the government relies on for efficiency. And then on top of that, there's the government itself and the role that it plays. This is a one-party system, and it's, they have to do their messaging, they have to have their means, they have to have their methodology, they have to explain this constantly, because there's nowhere for the Chinese government to go. I mean, the party controls it. If there is something that's wrong, the party is responsible. So it's a much heavier burden than if you're a Democrat or a Republican in the U.S. or in the House of Commons and you're a liberal or a Labor or conservative. You always have that safety hatch that you can blame the other side. You can sit out for a while until they make a mistake, and then you're brought back in. Chinese government doesn't have that luxury. So they have a process where they, and this is part of it, this plenum process, is about this kind of high-level things. What is the message? How are we going forward? And they made it very clear that pragmatic socialism is the way that they want to, they're going to go, that they put the people first, that this is about the welfare. And then they get into the specifics of how government will function underneath that, and the role of the party. Now, a lot of people are saying, oh, they've just made the party above the Constitution. Well, that's not correct. What they have said is that each party member is responsible under the rule of law, and that the party collectively will be making the decisions. Now, is this unheard of? No. If you look at in Britain, they do not have a written constitution. Everything is held in the House of Commons, and yet the system goes on. So this shows that there can be differences in how the political setup is, but ultimately it's always about what you accomplish. What are you able to do? And at this point, the Chinese government can point to a fairly robust history over the last 40 years in terms of transforming what was a country that had very little into something that is now the second largest economic force in the world.
And as the ruling party of the country, it's more than necessary to make the party itself strong. So this is also addressed in this time's session to build a strong and healthy party. And so bringing a specific topic into this, anti-corruption. And the party is not only focusing on anti-corruption, but also to prevent corruption from happening. So this is also reflected in another topic in this session, that is building a system of laws in China, including the regulations and laws within the party. What do you make of this, Mr.
Yes. In order to have a successful centralized leadership over such a large country, the party itself must be very strong, must be under very strict discipline. First of all, we say that we have been doing quite a lot and quite been successful. We have been quite successful in combating corruption. That is good, but not enough. We have to just wipe out the root cause of corruption. That is, we must have a strong discipline within the party. So no party members could be in the position to make any corruption. Then that is good, but not enough. The party discipline must be incorporated closely with the rule of law of the whole country. But because each party member is a citizen of the country, they must abide by the law of the country. The law is made by the People's the National People's Congress, and should be performed by all the governments. And also within the party's discipline must be in conformity with the law of the country and to support that.
And Mr. Stanton, we've discussed this several times before, and you often describe the Communist Party of China as a party that bears the ultimate responsibility for the country and its people. Tell us more about that.
Well, it's not something that's easy to take. I mean, if you're in that position, there's nowhere to hide. And that is why there's so much planning that goes in. And this is the real difference between, on an operational basis, between the, let's say, the United States. The United States, the planning changes every 4 to 8 years. Very little survives. We've seen what Donald Trump has done. He's basically eviscerated anything with Obama's name or legacy in it, including international treaties. It doesn't really matter, Obamacare, domestic or foreign. But in China, that does not happen. Things are done on a 5-year plan. There are 10-year plans, 15-year plans, 50-year plans, and everything is spelled out. The question is, how do you adjust as you go on this road? And I like this image that she used. She said, you know, you're on a road, it doesn't end. You never get to a destination. It's just you have to go on. And there's constant bends in the road beyond, and you cannot see. So you have to adjust. And this is the reality of government. You're not going to arrive at this point where everything is perfect. You continually have to strive to do that. So the Chinese government's in this position where it's in the driver's seat, but therefore it's responsible for everybody in the bus.
So we've talked about the ruling party, we've talked about the government. What about the fundamental political institution of China, that is the People's Congress system? It's also been addressed to improve, in this session, to improve this very system. What are the ways forward you've seen from this time session?
Okay, so here we're at the plenum. In December, there'll be another meeting of the Central Committee, and then it'll go to the NPC, the National People's Congress. And what you have is this careful correlation between the vision of what is being expressed at the plenum by the leading people. That'll be taken down to create action plans and laws, and then those laws are passed by the National Party Congress. Now, this is all in lockstep. They have to do it. But is there an opportunity for change? Absolutely. How many times we've sat here over the years and say that, well, this did not receive a good reaction, it was put on the table, it's going to be reviewed, things like this. So this idea that people have that there's somehow some sort of lockstep, rubber stamp is very wrong. And this is where I really, this idea of discipline is very important. When there are party meetings, all right, there are people, 90 million people, you can imagine. You can't get 6 people to agree on a restaurant. Imagine 90 million people agreeing on one direction. But there is one rule, and that is once consensus is reached, all right, the discipline is that you back the consensus, even if your own view was not agreed with that. Once that a consensus is there, everybody stands behind it. And this is what is necessary for a one-party system. It is not a one view. You have people who have very, very different ideas about how to go forward, how to tweak this journey that they're on. But as I said, you can't have people running in 6 directions. Imagine having 6 people at the helm of a bus, you know, trying to say, no, let's go right, let's go left, and there's dangers on either side. So there has to be one driver, and it has to be clear where the direction is.
So to follow Marx's historical materialism, we've talked about a superstructure. Now it's time for us to talk about a base, or the economic base, to be precise. Mr. He, one innovation was described by the Publicity Department press conference Friday morning, saying that it is the first time that a distribution system has been enlisted into the fundamental economic institution. That is, distribution according to labor is dominant, and a variety of other modes of distribution exist alongside it. Help us to understand this.
Yeah, because the nature of a socialist country or socialist system means that distribution is based on labor. However, we see that over the past 70 years, especially since the past 40 years, we have successfully developed a market economy, socialist market economy, which is based on the proficiency. And people with the capital investment earn money with their capital returns. That is legal. We cannot say this is not, we cannot do that. This is legal. However, in that case, there might be a tendency of disparity between the rich and the poor. If we drive the economy led by capital, that will result in that eventuality. However, since we are a socialist country, that means we must adjust that. We must have the redistribution according to labor, according to the disparity of rich and poor, so as to support all the people. So that means that distribution by labor is not the only rule, but that's the base. That means we serve the whole people.
So for more on China's economic system, let's talk to Mr. Michele Geraci in Rome. Mr. Geraci, you lived in China from 2008 to 2018 for a decade. From your observation in China, what are the unique features of this big term, socialist market economy of China?
Well, the success from the economic point of view, I think, is under everyone's eyes. We have had great achievements in reduction of poverty. Income for both rural and urban citizens has grown by 100 times over the last 40 years. The infrastructure has developed. When I came back to Italy in my role in the government, I've tried also to convey to the society here in Italy and in Europe the quick transition, both economic and social, that China has managed to do even during just the decade that I have experienced by living in China. In terms of technology, e-payments, companies like WeChat, Alibaba, and even we have been trying to take any learning points from China and see what could be adapted in the European system. Of course, different political and economic systems, but I've tried personally to do also a benchmarking exercise to see what countries around the world did, and of course China was one of those in terms of these situations. I agree very much with what was said before, that we are now also in a situation where we need to look at with the fast change in technology, artificial intelligence and everything, having one driver in the driving seat and put aside all the debates, once agreement is reached, that's it. It may actually provide China with the more stability than under a hypothetical different political system. And this is what the stability that I think the country needs. It's a large country with large disparities. We still have tens of millions of people still below the poverty line. There is a targeted poverty program to alleviate even those. And even recent growth in headline GDP that may be even below 6% or 5%, which of course for us is a dream number, does not mean necessarily bad news, because in the face of a lower GDP you may actually have a higher quality of GDP, and which basically means a better distribution and getting a little bit more to the low end of the income spectrum, because when the income is more evenly distributed, that also stimulates consumption, the propensity to consume increase. We have also engaged with China, as you have seen, in the Belt and Road. Italy is one of the main European countries, the first G7 country to sign this MOU, because, and this has been personally my effort, because I think it is also an area where Europe and the rest of the world could participate. It's an opportunity. Like all projects, there are risks and there are challenges, but it is important to bring these in the public debate. And I'm glad that the more we talk about China here in Europe, the more people understand and dissipate some of the myths. One more point, if I may. The managing of a country large as China is indeed a challenge, and I think, as Xi Jinping said, quoting Lao Tzu, is managing a big country is like trying to fry a small fish. 自打锅若烹小鲜, which basically means you also have to be careful to do so much but not more. And the example of the road, the turning, is a very nice visual example that we don't know what needs to happen. So we have to, just like when you fry fish, always keep and look at what's going on and adjust it as needed.
Well, Mr. Geraci, we'll be getting back to you on this. You're watching Dialogue on CGTN. Stay with us. So, gentlemen, let's talk about the economic system a little bit further. And in the targets and tasks of this session's communique regarding to economy, it says upholding and improving China's basic socialist economic system and promoting the high-quality development of the economy. Now, this is very interesting. Talking about high-quality development, it emphasized the importance of scientific and technological innovation. What stage is China in right now in this innovation procedure, Mr.?
I think China is still at the early stage of high-quality development, but the medium-late stage of industrialization. As all the societies have developed, we have had the rural society, then industrial society, then information society, then digital society. China is moving up the ladder in the economic and the technology advancement of all the economies in the world. But now, since we are the world's largest population, we have the world's largest population, and in the end, when our 2 centenary goals realized, then we will become the largest economy in the world. So we must move up the ladder with high technology and emerging technology leading the way. So in this case, we must have the appropriate economic system. If we have a wrong system, we will handicap the development of the economy and production forces. So the economic system is vital for China's socialism with Chinese characteristics. So we must have, of course, the public ownership, including state-owned and the collective, and then we have private and have a foreign ownership. All ownership will be equal. So in that case, a good mixture or good alignment of different systems will make up for the appropriate base for promoting the development of the economy.
You're talking about climbing that ladder, and sometimes it's not an easy ladder to climb up to, because earlier Mr. Geraci also talked about stability, the importance of stability, both from domestic and external environments. And talking about external challenges, this time session is quite straightforward. It says external environment is getting more complex. What are the specific issues in concern, Mr. Tang?
Oh, as if we didn't know there was a trade war going on. I mean, this is the issue.
Do you think it's also spreading to science and technology? Because looking at the situation faced by Huawei and many other Chinese companies outside China.
You've had effective decoupling, which is gone. The trust is gone. I cannot do business with you if I cannot trust you to deliver. I say, I need what you have, and if I don't know if you're going to do it, I have to look somewhere else. Businessmen are not in the gambling game. They're in very calculated, long-term business, just like diplomacy. You cannot go forward if you do not trust the other parties. And this is what's happening. I mean, you're already seeing diplomats, people who are in the Communist Party being denied entry into the United States. Students and professors are now under the microscope to determine whether or not they're spies and things like this. This kind of paranoia is feeding this kind of China threat dialogue that has been going on and been encouraged, quite frankly, by these things. We saw it with Pence, although he dialed it back from last year, it was still very palpable. And then you had Pompeo reinforcing it with saying that China has to be confronted. Now, you know, I'd like to just draw back 1 second and say things. A lot of the things we're talking about today in terms of global competition and things like this, these have been there before. We can go back to World War I, World War II, to the Roman Empire, Carthage, etc. There are many examples of that. The question is, how is China going to do this? And one of the things that I saw in the communique, which was very interesting, was an emphasis on culture. All right, that the Chinese culture is in essence a bedrock of what connects the Chinese people and what has allowed them to go forward these 5,000 years with an identity. I was at an art opening for a former Minister of Culture here, Gao Jiansheng, and I looked at it and I thought to myself, you know, the things that we talk about on a daily basis about all these technical issues and political, 200 years from now, no one will really know that much about them. But the art, the things that are contributed, the culture that continues will still be very, very strong. And I think this is something that people should not overlook when they're looking at these communiques. It's not just about the numbers and culture. It's about fairness, social equality, and promoting culture.
And in reality, another approach China is taking is, seems like to be opening its market further to the outside world. For example, the second China International Import-Expo is coming up, and China is now setting up many free trade pilot zones all around the country. What do you make of this openness? Do you think the Chinese players are prepared to face even more severe competitions from foreign players on domestic and also on international stages?
I think these two factors do not contract each other, because first of all, for China to develop into a modernized socialist state by the mid-century, we must absorb all the best resources of the world, the best knowledge, best technology, best talents, and financial resources and the markets. So we must open our door wide and we'll let all the best resources come in. We welcome and cooperate in China and in the world. This is the only way for China to develop into a more advanced socialist state. So at the same time, we face very contradicted, a very difficult international situation. As my friend just mentioned clearly, I quite agree with him that the Trump administration and not all Americans, but a few Americans are very hawkish, and the central piece of their mentality is to check China from rising and from competing, from challenging the United States.
But you're saying that China's thinking is totally different from that.
Different. We are not a challenger.
Development can be achieved by a mutual process rather than the us and them mentality. And talking about that, how about the very idea of building a community with a shared future for mankind? And let's talk to Mr. Geraci in Rome. Mr. Geraci, let's talk about this from a specific angle, the Belt and Road Initiative. We know that Italy is the first country in the G7 to participate in this China-proposed initiative. What do you think will be the implications both economically and politically around the world?
We have had some political implication already, because we were heavily criticized both by the international press and even by the European allies, because just like you said, we were the first country to do that. In my view, being the first country poses, of course, those risks, but also some opportunities. And maybe what we were trying to do is to put Italy into a leading position just for being the first one. In fact, other countries, European countries, followed. Switzerland and even Luxembourg, one of the founding members of the European Union, followed. Just a little bit like what happened during the setting up of the AAB, where a few countries first joined, there was reluctance, and then the UK joined, and everyone followed, pretty much everyone except the United States and Japan. So for us, and for me personally, this was an opportunity to put the dialogue on China back at the center of the political agenda. I do think that information is at the basis to allow countries to talk and do business with each other. And I did find that there was a lack of knowledge about this program. It's very confusing in the minds of the Italian public. What is it that China wants to do? Of course, we do think it's an opportunity for our companies in some specific sectors to go into partnership with Chinese companies to develop infrastructure, energy, agriculture, and machinery, which are basically the things that Italian and Chinese companies can work together with, into the whole area that goes from China to Europe, so Central Asia, Middle East, and even Africa. In Africa specifically, we have a continuous problem of migration due to political and economic reasons in Africa. And my objective was, and will be anyway in the future, to give Africa a way to stabilize itself from a social and political point of view. And I do think that this Belt and Road could also be one way. It's not just China, it's Europe, it's United States, it's Japan that do invest in Africa. And the way we need to do it is to make sure that we do cooperate, to make sure that things are done in a transparent manner. Africa becomes a stable continent, and so we get the benefit, A, of having our companies doing business, which is very good, and stabilize this flow of people, which is not good for us, that we cannot, Europe cannot take 200 million people coming from Africa, and even Africa cannot deplete itself from probably the best people. The challenges are there, and it is important to know, and I think the interest is witnessed also in the fact that we are going back to China to attend the Shanghai Fair, to give support to companies, because companies don't like just the words that we politicians maybe sometimes say. They want to see concrete, tangible benefit. So
you're saying that
Shanghai Fair is an opportunity.
Shared future also means a shared responsibility. Thank you very much, Mr. Michele Geraci in Rome. Very quickly, Mr. Tangen, what do you think is the essence of building a community of a shared future for mankind? Is it peaceful development? Is it peaceful coexistence? What exactly is it?
It is peaceful coexistence. The idea that you have paths for opportunity that are parallel. And this is very important, that you don't have to necessarily live the way your neighbor lives, but you have to respect them and the fact that they have their own household. Each country has to align itself with this idea that they don't have all the answers, that we're simply, as I said, going along the different roads, trying to find our way, and looking for those opportunities where we can cooperate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aina Tangen and Mr. He Wenda. And that's it for this edition of Dialogue on CGTN. I'm Pan Dong in Beijing. Bye-bye.